collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, British experts return to Cyprus to help with civil service reform.
We're looking at issues around staffing in the ministry, its capacity, its capability, its mandate, and whether those mandates match with the capability of the ministry and its staff to carry out those functions.
We'll hear about a House of Commons committee discussing Cyprus.
Charalambous, who has worked on this issue for a very long time in various countries, including Bosnia, for example, he was insistent that a new way of dealing with things in Cyprus should be established.
And the UN Secretary-General's Special Advisor on Cyprus, Espen Barth Eide, is upbeat about a Cyprus solution.
Economic elements of settlement have two dimensions. One is popular and well-known, that somebody has to help to pay. Now, that's an old thing. And one thing Cyprus happily agree upon is somebody else should pay. And I actually think that's quite fair. So all Cyprus and me think that somebody else should pay something.
We've spoken before on the programme about civil service reform. Joining us today on a short visit to Cyprus is Chris Cooper, who's from the UK's National School for Government International. It's a bit of a mouthful, Chris. What actually are you doing here?
We're helping the Government of Cyprus with their public administration reform programme. We've been here for a couple of years now. We started 2 years ago in looking at the human resource management systems across the whole of the Government of Cyprus, and subsequently we've done a number of other studies on various ministries within Cyprus. We've looked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Defence, and we've also done smaller reviews on the Department of the Registrar of Companies, and we're now in the middle of a review of the Ministry of Energy, Commerce, Industry and Tourism.
When you say a review, what sort of things do you look at? And then, having looked at them, what sort of changes are you able to suggest?
Okay. The reviews are styled as functional reviews, so we're looking at issues around the staffing in the ministry, its capacity, its capability, its mandate, and whether those mandates match with the capability of the ministry and its staff to carry out those functions. We've been producing reports on these things, and they've been submitted to the Cyprus administration. They're led by the reform team in the Ministry of Cyprus, and we've had very, very good cooperation with the reform team and our colleagues in the Government of Cyprus, who've been very supportive of these reviews all the way through the process.
And have they actually managed to start implementing any of them?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that the Government of Cyprus has begun to take up some of the conclusions and recommendations that we've made, and we're looking forward to further implementation as we submit further reports.
The end result, hopefully, of course, is going to be a streamlined and much more productive civil service. A lot of people here, particularly the unions, think, oh my goodness, that'll mean job cuts, you're going to put people out of work. Does it necessarily mean that? We've heard a lot of talk about moving people across from ministries where they're surplus to requirements to ones which are short of staff.
It doesn't necessarily mean job cuts, but what it does necessitate is greater flexibility in the way in which civil servants can be moved between ministries. What we anticipate is that some ministries and some functions will be less relevant in the modern age, but other ministries, on the other hand, will have new needs. And therefore, if the human resource management system is flexible enough, there should be the ability to move people between ministries from less important functions to more priority functions.
And another bugbear that's been discussed for many, many years is, first of all, productivity, and B, how you measure it and ensure that people are working.
You're absolutely correct. Productivity of civil servants is a key issue for any government. Any government, whatever political colour, deserves a civil service that can carry out the government's policies in the most efficient and effective manner. What we've done, therefore, as a part of our human resource management study, is to recommend to the Government of Cyprus a performance management system which allows fair, open and transparent appraisals to be undertaken of civil servants by their line managers and allows distinctions to be made between good performing civil servants and less well performing civil servants. Again, this is not a threat to the less well performing, but there should be opportunities for the less well performing through training to improve their performance.
And there should also presumably be encouragement to those who do perform well in terms of promotions, which is again something that's not happened in Cyprus because it's always been down to how long your bum's been on the seat.
Again, one of our recommendations is to introduce a more meritocratic means of managing promotions, which will be based partly on their performance appraisals for the past 2 or 3 years, but also on other factors which come into account when assessing people's qualifications and abilities for promotion.
When does your remit come to an end? You said that you've been coming back and forth for a couple of years now. We haven't actually seen any changes happening yet. How long is this going to go on for before we can see results?
Our reports are to the government of Cyprus. It's for the government of Cyprus to say what it wants to do with those reports and when it wants to implement them.
All right, well, when do your reports come to an end? I mean, how many more have you got to do?
We've got one more to finish on the Ministry of Energy, Commerce, Industry and Tourism. Our reports on the other ministries and the human resource management system have already been submitted and are under consideration. The most important of those is the Human Resource Management Report, which I understand is with the Council of Ministers as we speak, and we can expect some decisions about how the government wishes to proceed with that Human Resource Management Report in the very near future.
Chris Cooper from the UK's National School of Government International. Thank you for joining me.
A pleasure.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Last week in London, the National Federation of Cypriots in the UK had a meeting. You could call it a conference, I suppose. It was discussing Cyprus' new hopes for a settlement. And attending the meeting was Anna Koukidis Prokopiou. Anna, what actually came out of that meeting?
There were two very important things that did come out of that meeting. First of all, that the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots have finally managed to open a good channel of communication. And that doesn't just boil down to Anastasiadis and Akinzi, although things to be going well down that front. It was quite surprising, I would think, that the mayor of Gerinia, Glafkos Kariolu, was there in this meeting, and he was there to support Koray, the Turkish Cypriot who was holding the flag of the Republic of Cyprus and was reprimanded and taken to court by the Turkish Cypriot authorities. And it was quite surprising to see a Greek Cypriot being there to offer his wholehearted support to the cause of a Turkish Cypriot who was in favor, not in promoting a bizonal, bicommunal federation, in fact, but a united Cyprus. And the talk was very different. I think the narrative was different from other times because the emphasis was put by different people, actually, that a solution in Cyprus should not actually be dividing people and should not be pointing out who is Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot or Maronite or Armenian, but the emphasis should be on creating a unitary Cypriot citizenship where everyone can fit in despite of their ethnic background.
But does that fit in with the plans for a bizonal federation?
Well, I think it doesn't, and it was quite surprising because there was quite a big discussion about that matter in the meeting. The ambassador of Cyprus to the UK was there. He didn't take a position, obviously, because as you've just pointed out, really that's not the plan of the government of the Republic of Cyprus, and is not a plan which is currently being discussed.
So one might ask who all these British MPs are who think they can come along when things are going so well here in the negotiations and say you're negotiating the wrong thing.
Well, to be fair, the British MPs did not position themselves at all on this political discussion. It was the Cypriots themselves who opened this discussion. There were two main contributions to the discussion by Sir Alan Mill and of course by Teresa Villiers, and it's very notable because she's a very busy lady, as we all know, a Secretary of State, and yet she was there to participate in the discussion and to position herself on a very, let's say, troublesome topic like the Cyprus problem, which is very close to her heart for some time now. The emphasis was on is that the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriot seem to be doing quite well, cooperating, and now it's the need to put a lot of pressure on Turkey to respond, because the Turkish troops need to go. Otherwise, it's very difficult to have a solution which has legitimization in the eyes of people, and of course it's very difficult to allow people to work things out themselves in Cyprus if you have the presence of foreign troops.
Sure, but we also have Greek troops on this side, and of course then there are the British bases. But Mustafa Akinci has been very outspoken about the role he expects Turkey to play. And he doesn't seem to want to kowtow to Turkish policy if it goes against what he feels is best for Turkish Cypriots and indeed for the negotiations for reunifying Cyprus.
I think, Rosie, it's important to remember that part of the problem in Cyprus is actually a problem of a foreign army invading and occupying a significant part of the territory. And I don't think you can really equate the number of Turkish troops on the island who are illegally holding land with the very few Greek soldiers who've been around for some time now, or the British troops in the sovereign base areas who are here legitimately and based on legitimate agreements. I don't think you can equate the two things, two very different things. Now, of course, I can see, and it was something else that was mentioned in the meeting, is that he has very limited capacity in making his own decisions to begin with. And many examples were drawn in situations where I can see I was willing, for example, to allow the fire brigade from the Republic of Cyprus to enter the area when Famagusta was burning a few days ago, and the Turkish troops couldn't give permission for that. And of course the discussion on the opening of the Darinya checkpoint, again, it's something which stumbles upon the insistence of the Turkish troops for that not to be done. Of course, I can see has other considerations in mind, and it's very rational. It's a logical way of going about the way he needs to deal with things. Of course, depends on Turkey, and nobody can actually dispute that.
So what came out of the meeting finally?
Well, another discussion that was quite emphatically put forward was, of course, the discussion on the missing persons. And Charalambous, who has worked on this issue for a very long time in various countries, including Bosnia, for example, he was insistent that a new way of dealing with things in Cyprus should be established. That discussion should be out in the open about not necessarily who did what, but exactly what happened, because the families of the victims cannot put themselves at ease unless they know what happened to the family members, to the friends, to the beloveds. So it did take up quite a lot of time in the discussion. And of course, as you may know, there have been talks of setting up a truth commission in Cyprus. There's been an initiative going on. There was a debate last week about this issue, and I would think that Charalambous would be implying that that's the way to go, even though, of course, a few people would argue that scratching old wounds may not be exactly the wise thing to do at a point when negotiations are actually going well after quite a long time, when two sides wouldn't even sit at the same table to discuss things.
We'll just have to wait and see how things pan out. Anna Koukidis Prokopiou, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rosie.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Last week at the CVAR in Nicosia, the UN Secretary-General's Special Advisor for Cyprus, Espen Barth Eide, gave a talk. He took questions afterwards, but here's what he had to say at the beginning of the evening.
I am here at a very special time in the process towards reunification of Cyprus. I think that I'm sometimes perceived as communicating too much of an optimistic message. And I think a lot of people understandably are saying this is too good to be true. It is simply not possible that the leaders suddenly have this wonderful climate dealing with all the difficult issues and having progress every single day. It must be a setup. It must be some kind of a ploy to try to fool people, because this is not happening in Cyprus. Well, I'm a witness to say it is happening. It's happening right now. And I'm watching it every single day. Tomorrow I have the pleasure of hosting Mr. Mustafa Kinci, Mr. Nikos Anastasiadis once again at our premises and good offices, UN good offices in the buffer zone, Old Nicosia Airport, where we have our meetings. That is their 6th formal leaders meeting. The meeting tomorrow is the 6th formal leaders meeting. They have met a multitude of times, of course, in many different occasions, including, and I recognize faces from yesterday's event, organized by the 2 chambers of commerce, where they both had very bold and very encouraging speeches about the economic potential for United Federal Cyprus. But the formal leaders meeting, this is the 6th one. Remember that we just started. We had a dinner. There were 7 months of nothing. Well, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes, but there was no formal communication since October until April. Then we agreed in early April that we were again able to hold meetings, but no meetings were held before the elections in the Turkish Cypriot community. As you know, the outcome was that Mustafa Kinci was elected and installed. And only a few days later, we had a very important dinner at Ledra Palace on the 11th of May, which led to the first meeting being held at the 15th of May. So this is moving forward with incredible pace. But that's just the leaders' level. Only to take the last 2 weeks. Since last Monday, a week and a half ago, we've had meetings every single day of the negotiating teams, either between the negotiators, which are most of the days, or at working group level. And I can testify that in every one of these meetings, we have reduced differences and improved the amount of agreement or strategic agreement that later will move into full formalized agreement. It's quite an experience, and I've been reflecting upon how come this is possible. The answer is, of course, very complex, and I'm sure I don't have the full answer. Maybe we have a better answer all of us together. But the short answer is that the Cyprus question is perfectly solvable. It's difficult, it's complex, it has long history, a lot of emotions, a lot of practical, a lot of conceptual challenges, but it's a perfectly solvable problem. However, in order to solve it, you need 3 ingredients that were not here. You need trust, genuine, sustained trust between the 2 sides and their leaders. And I say not only the leaders, also the 2 sides, the 2 communities. You need genuine will, and you need leadership. And those ingredients were not, for many years, were not in place, at least not at the same time. The 3 of them at the same time and in both communities. You probably always had a little bit of each, but the 3 things together on both sides is quite unique. Well, I'm still quite new to Cyprus, although I must admit I've been following the issue for many, many years. You know, this total immersion is only since over a year. But people who have followed it for many, many years, and I speak to a lot of people around the island and international observers of Cyprus, says that this is quite unique. This simultaneous existence of these 3 factors is quite unique. It means, in turn, that the 2 sides, that means the leaders, the negotiators, negotiating teams, and the people helping them, have changed the attitude from one of defending their positions against each other. So, slightly caricature, we have a meeting, I have not changed my opinion since last time we met, have you? No, okay, meeting is over. Until an attitude of solving problems, which means you and I disagree, that's a problem, it's a joint problem, we have to solve it jointly. It's a completely different attitude, and that's sort of the key ingredients of what is different now. Now, I'm saying here, and I've said in other occasions, that trust, will, and leadership on the elite level is super important, but it's not enough. It's incredibly important that Cypriot society, Turkish Cypriot, Greek Cypriots, engage, express their opinion, think about this, engage, deal with it, write about it, speak about it, and organize cultural events. Because all leaders, I have been many years in politics myself, I know that strong leadership also requires support, engagement, critique. You need to interact with the broader society. And I think this is really the time which is urgently, immediately important, at least for those of you who think reunification is a good idea, that people actually engage and support, but also expect from leaders, expect and discuss the different issues. I also want to say something else which we have been discussing quite a bit actually lately in the talks that I'm chairing, which is the dilemma that we all feel. And I'm happy to say, all of us, the negotiator leaders, everyone, this dilemma. We would like to be much more open on the substantive progress that we're making, because we also know that it would be better not only to say we made progress, but to say progress on what. But we're also aware, and we have to say what trumps that is that we must not risk the dynamic development of the talks by some particular issue being taken out of context and then being capitalized upon by people who don't want a solution in order to say that must be a red line, we demand immediate clarity on whether you really said that, and that you create a dynamic that I think many of you may have seen in previous occasions. However, we do want eventually to move into a space where we can be more open and, of course, led by the leaders, because this is a leader-led process. I'm there to support them. I'm not there to drive them, force them in a particular direction. I'm there to support them on behalf of the UN Secretary General, and that's the relationship we have. But this is a sense that we really have. But a couple of things I want to say. There is a real and genuine understanding at leaders level in the negotiating teams, and I hope and I believe increasingly so in the communities, that we will not solve the Cyprus problem if the two sides do not recognize the inner and deep concerns of the other side. If you're not able to understand that you are not the only ones with grievances, and you are not the only ones with bad memories, you are not the only ones who have suffered or have family who have suffered, that you are not the only ones who have concerns about what will happen in the future, it won't happen. So it's perfectly legitimate, I would say even the right thing to do, to stand up and be honest about your own concerns and grievances and challenges. But I think it's only legitimate if you simultaneously are willing to accept that some of those exist on the other side. In reverse, but the same concern. One person's fear does not imply that the other person also feels some kind of fear. And that is also some of the change I'm feeling in what I'm seeing, hearing. Many surprisingly positive statements about recognizing that a shared trouble history is a shared trouble history. It's not the trouble history of one side against the other. It's a shared trouble history. And there's no need to kind of decide who suffered most or who was the worst. It's simply to recognize that there's something out there. You don't have to say that the others had more trouble than you. It's just to recognize there's something there that's of paramount importance. That's happening. That also means that the crucial issue of political equality, that we end up with a genuine federal structure in which there are two constituent states with clear powers, with clear competences, clearly defined, but in something which is a federal structure, not a confederal structure, and where the federal capacities are full, understandable and clear and shared is imperative, and we're working exactly in that direction because that's the direction the leaders want to go in. If anybody suspects any of these teams to try to do anything less, they're wrong. I can assure you that's what we're working to do, that's what they are working to do. Secondly, I want to share something, and I know I can because this came very clear out yesterday from the leaders, so I'm not saying something new, but I'm just underlining a point that came very clearly through the two public speeches of yesterday, but which I would say essential theme in our discussions. The new United Federal Cyprus doesn't have a name yet, just a placeholder for whatever name the leaders choose or people choose, but the new federal country will be a European Union member, of course, we all knew that, but there is a full 100% agreement about the European Union character of that state. Not 50%, not 90%, not 95%, 100%, which means that European principles will apply throughout, which means that European acquis is essential, which means that the ability, not only in theory but in practice, that the full state must be able, the federation must be able to work as a well-functioning European Union member with all that implies. And I think one of the reasons that that is so clear now is that the leadership that is currently in place in both countries are genuinely Europeans. It's not because they have to, it's because they want to. I also want to say another thing, which is maybe I should admit with some help from us, but there is now a very rapidly increasing understanding that you need to discuss the economic elements of a settlement. Economic elements of settlement have two dimensions. One is popular and well known, that somebody has to help to pay. Now that's an old thing. And one thing Cyprus happily agree upon is somebody else should pay. And I actually think that's quite fair. So all Cyprus and me think that somebody else should pay something. But there's another element to economy, which is economy is not only about spending money, it's also about creating money and creating wealth. And there is, in my view, and I still have two jobs, even if most of my time now takes place in Cyprus and the World Economic Forum. Of course, from that perspective also I'm seeing that there is a tremendous potential in the United Cyprus for a number of reasons, but one of them being, well, it would be one economy rather than two, so that's an economy of scale. But also because if anybody had any investor or economic operator was concerned about sort of geopolitical consequences of engaging in Cyprus, they will at least be significantly reduced through settlement, because then you have clarity on the future of the state. So I think will be a very attractive destination, also because Cyprus, after having some rather tough experiences over the last years, where I know a lot of people was personally heavily affected by, is also now moving out of this in ways which I think other countries, not mentioning any particular country, but other countries could learn something from. And that's also a very good starting point. But here comes the point. These economic opportunities do not simply happen. They have to be prepared, which means that we also now, and I think that's a theme which was not been so much present in previous rounds of intents, to make sure that the new construct is fiscally viable, is economically sound, is modern 21st century prepared to capitalize on that potential. And another point I keep making, which my friends in the negotiation normally likes, if they probably sometimes think I'm over-insisting on, but which is, I'm very happy if they agree, but I also would like to check that what they agree upon is a modern 21st century solution, and not simply a replica of old debates that were held many, many years ago. Because after all, if we succeed, and I still say if, because obviously we're not there, by all means, there's a lot of work to do. If we succeed, at that date, it will be the most modern constitution in Europe, by definition, because it was just made. So, technically, it's obviously the most modern. But it also has to be the most modern in content. I mean, you cannot make a constitution in 2015 that looks like it's written half a century ago. So, because countries fortunately do not write constitutions every week. So it's going to last for a while. And that's also very important. That's why I think a debate, what I see the contours of is an ability to have a discussion in Cyprus, not on what do I get and what do you give to them and what do you get, but what do we, Cypriots, you Cypriots, I'm almost becoming Cypriots, what do Cypriots themselves, yourself, actually want the state to look like? Beyond quotas, beyond that kind of arrangements, and how is that solution also viable in a fiscal sense, but also we're in the Art Centre also able to really exploit and build on the enormously rich cultural heritage, which is very special. And I you all know that because you probably all like your country. But I'm, as a foreigner, say that there's a lot of interesting countries in the world, but the richness and the variety and the traces of everybody who's been here and the way all of this has been integrated into something very special is something to be incredibly proud of. And of course, in my European liberal attitude, it's much more fascinating to live in a country that is genuinely diverse. Rather than trying to make my country as monocultural and similar as possible. So, this is really a cultural wealth, which I think is good for those who live here and good for those who come here alike. So, I'm ending there and then opening for questions. I deliberately did not say exactly where we are in the talks because I can't and it's unfair, and I will wait till the leaders are ready to say exactly that. I probably still said a little bit much. But what I'll tell you is that this is for real. This is a real opportunity. And it's beyond opportunities. You know, I'm always wondering, to be very honest with you, I'm always wondering, is there something we didn't think of that can derail this process? Maybe. I'm sure you all have that concern. And it can still happen. But for every evening going home after excellent meetings between people who like each other, who work together, who are partners, who still disagree, but to disagree respectfully and to reduce the disagreement because they think agreement is better than disagreement, I feel it's less probable. And that's why I'm insisting on keeping up the pace, structuring, organizing the talks with my excellent team of people who are here and experts who we bring in to help, to facilitate, to think, maybe sometimes think out of the box, sometimes ask a slightly different question than those that have been asked over the centuries. And what I really encourage you, if you want a solution, because it's a free democratic choice, of course you can vote no if you like, but those of you, and I suspect some of you are here, who would like a solution to happen, it's time now to really engage yourself about not only saying we want a solution, but what solution do you want? Because you have something which very few people in my political career before I came here, I worked a lot of conflicts. I basically, in most of my jobs, has been studying and working on trying to resolve conflicts and sometimes failing, occasionally having a positive impact. The world is full of trouble. This is not, the world doesn't look very nice these days. The neighborhood you're living in does not look very nice in either direction, either you go east or west, doesn't look particularly nice. It has to be a factor. It's not only about, I mean, let me be very frank with you, the smallest problem you have is the other side of the island. Of everything else you should be concerned about, I'm not sure if the concerns are directed in the right direction. But for that very reason, grasp this opportunity, and I think it will be good not only for everybody living on this beautiful island, but also for the entire neighborhood and for the world.
The UN Secretary-General's Special Advisor on Cyprus, Espen Barth Eide, talking in Nicosia last week. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.